Welcome to Grief, Grace, and Gratitude. I'm your host, Rhonda Kemp. On this podcast, we will be sharing our grief journeys with one another. Each one of our guests will talk about the loved ones they've lost to overdose, as well as the impact of substance use disorder. As you listen, you could write down and share with us a question or discussion topic that you would like to see us include in our future episodes. Just as it says in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 18, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." My hope is to bring comfort to those who are crushed in spirit. As we talk about the shame of addiction and devastation of loss, we want you to learn how to survive and even thrive while navigating through the difficulty of grief.
Hello, welcome to Grief, Grace, and Gratitude. I'm really honored to have Bob Willis with us. He's a pastor and author, a bereavement counselor, and also a grief group leader. So you've got quite a background, Bob, in grief itself. And we met at a retreat for Hope After Loss, which I help lead meetings every month, and we also do retreats, little mini mom retreats. So really good organization, and it's brought me a lot of comfort and community. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Bob, and tell us a little bit about your life journey that's brought you into this type of work.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. And I really appreciate the opportunity just to be able to share with you and let people tune in. Maybe we can give them some things to support them and guide them a little bit. That's my goal. Well, I am actually a recovering Baptist preacher. Okay, still in recovery. Had to go to weekly meetings, but I pastored churches in Kentucky and Tennessee and Oklahoma for 18 years, and then something happened to me. I fell in love with grievers. I began to volunteer for a hospice program and do some chaplain work and bereavement work with them. And then when the Oklahoma City bombing took place in '95, God just opened the door for me to do grief work full time. Went to work for the hospice, so I was their grief counselor for 17 years here in Oklahoma City, and best job I ever loved. I tell you, to be able to be with people at the most difficult time of life, they open their hearts, their arms, and they're able to be there and walk that journey with them. If I had another life, I would go back to hospice and do that again. But since '95, I've been doing grief groups and working with people who've had all types of losses because we were a hospice who gave back to the community. So we dealt not just with hospice families, but the families throughout the community. And so that's what I liked about it. And I've had some time in the funeral industry doing some follow up with them. And it's just been, I retired about 12 years ago, so I could do more grief conferences, workshops. And I'm also a sculptor, so it gives me time to branch off and do some things for a good therapy for me, give me some balance in my life. But
Yeah.
they're just, I'm in love with grievers.
Well, that's quite a testimony. And, a lot of times we see our friend in the store that knows we're in grief,
Mm.
and they can take that next aisle over, just because it can be hard to know what to say,
Right. It is difficult to know what to say. And, people don't realize that when you go even to a grocery store, it can be emotional for a loss because you might see food on the shelf that you bought for your loved one, and there it went. There come the tears. I do not worry about people who cry. Crying tears is very normal, and so but we like to choose where we cry and when we cry. We don't always have that luxury. Sometimes sneaks up on us.
There's so many triggers when you lose someone. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary for my daughter passing, and she overdosed on opioids
Well,
and had a sleeping pill mixed in with the mix
no.
after a kidney stone. But anyway, she did suffer from addiction, the disease of substance use disorder, and passed away. So it's been 10 years, and in that first beginning, I didn't think I'd make it 10 years, and I have. So I know for me, my faith has been a big part of that.
Right. Right. I've had people, unfortunately, some people will say grief takes a year and some people say 2 years. I do not believe any of that, Rhonda. In fact, I have found a way, though, to tell when you're over grief. This is a way to tell when you're over grief. Is you take your hand and you put it across your chest. If you feel a heartbeat, you're not over it.
True.
As long as you got a brain and a heartbeat, we'll be grievers. And so we need to allow ourselves not to go by a clock, because grief doesn't go by a clock. It doesn't go by a calendar. It just, it's different for every person, but it's what we feel on the inside. In fact, probably if the thing in grief work, Rhonda, that's helped me more than anything else is realizing after a loss in our life, what we feel on the inside, that emptiness, and the heaviness, and the sadness, that's our grief. And no one can see it. It's private. It's different for every person in the family. But when you talk about it, it becomes mourning. So grief is on the inside. Mourning is when it is expressed. In the Bible, it does not say, Jesus didn't say, blessed are those who grieve. He said, bless those who mourn. They should be confident. So that's the difference between holding it in and letting it out. So my ministry, Rhonda, has always been to give people some tools to put words to their grief. That way it's mourning.
And that, if you were to say, is one of the elements of grief, if you were to break it down, vocalizing it through group settings or just any.
Right. Some people are groupies and some are not. Some are complement groups and some are not. And that's okay. But sometimes we just need to find that safe person. And a safe person is someone who will lend us their ears and not their mouth. The one who is. Because we want them just to hear us, because we're putting words to our grief. And so we're not asking for opinions. We're not asking for judgments. We're asking for someone to hear us. I did a group probably 10 years ago now, Rhonda. A young man in the group who was 18 and his 17-year-old friend had died. And I made this statement in a group, and I make it in every group, that we only need someone who will listen to us. And he said, that's right, Bob, but we also need someone who will hear us. And as I was driving home, I thought about what he said. And I realized we listen to people, and sometimes we'll come in one ear and go out the other ear. We listen with our ears. But you hear with your H-E-A-R-T. You can't spell the word heart until you spell the word hear, put a T on it. So we need that person who will hear us on that level. That's a treasure to find that person.
That is so true. And that's a great way to remember when you're listening that,
Right.
Many times when someone's talking, we're thinking about what we're going to say.
Right. Yeah. Because we're up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we're down here, we're hearing them on the heart level. And that's what grievers need, because we need a safe person who will allow us to speak to their heart. And as I say, that person is a treasure. And it isn't always in a group setting. Sometimes in groups, we can learn some fundamentals and some tools, but being able to use those, internalize those, and express them might be on an individual basis. And it may not be spoken, it might be a written word. In all the groups I do, I teach a format to write a letter to the person who died. We may write more than one letter, and maybe a dozen letters to them. But it gives us an opportunity to put words to our feelings and get them out here. Of course, it helps to speak them if we can, but if we do not have that person to speak to, it helps for us to organize them enough so we can express them.
That's one of the first things I did. I would write in my phone statements to Lacey, my daughter.
Good.
It became an interactive grief journal when I had hundreds of statements, and that goes into what journaling can be so healing. And I didn't have the energy just to pick up a blank piece of paper and start writing, so it was just fill in the blanks, and it really works for some people.
Right. Yes.
So what would you say to someone that their family, I hear we talk to grievers all the time too in Hope After Loss, and I hear sometimes the family, the unit of sisters and parents and people right in our closest group don't always mention the loved one that's passed.
Mm-hmm.
they just kind of stay silent about it. And they always say, well, I don't want to bring up her name because it hurts you more. But they don't understand that we're always thinking of our loved one that's passed.
Right. Names don't die.
No. So what's the best thing to say to a family member after someone's passed that you would, what are the words that you could use if you could?
Right. Well, the approach I usually take is, I never met them, so the way I'll know them is when you tell me about them. So why don't you tell me about Lacey? Why don't you tell me about James? Why don't you just tell me? I want to know them through you. And that gives them freedom to put words to it. There's someone who's asking for it instead of just meeting a stranger. I want to hear that because it's their words. And after they talk for a while, I may want to ask another question about, tell me a little bit more about their personality. What kind of character did they have? Yeah, because everyone has a personality, and that's what triggers the memories back here, their personality, their laughter, their tears. And I just want to talk about those memories for a while because that's what makes up the person. I want to hear about that person.
Yeah. And for a moment, you don't feel like they're quite so far away if you can just talk about who they are to you.
Right. Because they still are, aren't they? They still are that to us. Because we lose people physically. That's the part we lose. We never lose people emotionally. We never lose people spiritually. We lose a physical relationship. So since they're still part of us emotionally, the least little thing will trigger emotions. And that causes us to laugh, might cause us to cry. And maybe no one else notices it, but we do, because it triggers the emotional relationship we still have. My dad died 30 years ago. I still have an emotional relationship with him. And there's still some things that trigger emotions. And that's okay because he's still there. I haven't lost him.
Maybe we're just a society that's uncomfortable with emotion.
You're right. I'm very uncomfortable with grief. How most people want us to get over it and be normal again. More normal won't happen anymore. Rhonda, I had a lady in one of my grief groups. She said, Bob, normal is a setting on my washing machine that says normal. I promise I did this. I went home and looked at the dial on the washing machine at those words. Normal is on that dial. Yes, and so is heavy load. Some days you're grieving because it's so heavy you can't get out of bed. Line those on that dial. And on those days where you go in circles and didn't accomplish anything, that's your spin cycle. And if you cry a lot, that's your rinse cycle. It's all on that dial. It's what they call wash day grief. But normal is on that dial.
Yeah. We just did a retreat, a small one in Colorado Springs for moms. And some of the questions were, how do I get rid of my brain fog? And I had to think about that because it's been 10 years for me. And, I still have a little brain fog. I don't know if I can blame it on grief or age, but that is one of the scary parts about grief is you do really physically change.
Yes. And there is a fog, there is a brain fog, and it's very normal for our concentration level just to be shut down because we're in survival mode. And so it's hard for us to focus. In fact, you can drive a car without a brain in the car. We do that when we're grievers, and we drive right past our driveway and have to turn around and come back. But the fog part is something that does lift, and then something, maybe a birth date or a holiday will come, and that fog will come back down over us. It doesn't just forever go away. It'll come and go. And so the beauty of it is that we recognize that's what it is. It's a brain fog, but it's grief. It's what it is. It's part of the grief journey. And again, it's normal.
Yeah, everything that you're experiencing is normal, even if you don't think you're doing it. One of my questions, I was not in a group setting for 6 years or so, and one of my questions is, maybe I'm going to forget her if I quit hurting. So I have to have this feeling forever and ever, ever. And am I doing it right or am I going crazy? I really thought I was maybe losing it for a while.
Yeah, there's one of the first things I do in a group setting is try to normalize feelings. Or if I'm meeting with a person one-on-one, I want to normalize the feelings. It's normal to cry and it's normal to lose their concentration and have eating and sleeping patterns that are all messed up. That's normal. And to feel some guilt. I discovered something that really helped me personally was understanding the difference between guilt and regret. We interchange those words a lot, like we do grief and mourning. I can have guilt if I made an intentional decision and I knew what the outcome would be. I might have guilt over that because I knew what I was doing. I knew what was going to happen. I might carry guilt over that. Enjoy the time we're dealing with regrets. Regrets are, if I could go back, I would change this and I would change that. Those are the regrets. Most of the time we're dealing with regrets in a grief journey. But they're both normal. They simply are. Doesn't mean we're losing it, but sometimes we do think we are.
Yeah. Yeah. The thought patterns need some help sometimes because you can just keep going through that same drudgery that you've done something wrong. Yeah, especially when you're dealing with addiction. Have you had people with addiction in your close family?
Not in I have in my close family yet, but even the groups that I lead, occasionally be someone will come that has a loss because of an addiction. And what I want to do is I don't want them to compare their loss with the person who was married 65 years and someone died, because every loss is 100% for that person. I've never met anyone grieving 101 or 99%. With that person, their grief is 100%. The only time we'll work on our grief is when we realize, okay, that's 100% for me. But we can't minimize our grief and compare it to someone else because it's total loss for us. And so tools, I think, are very helpful to be able to put words in it, whether it's someone who's been married since the Last Supper or someone that's dealing with the loss because of addiction. I want to talk about the person. Let's talk about the grief and the relationship, because that's the important part. It's their grief journey.
And that regret, do you find most everyone in grief has that question? Did I do something? Or because I only know from my own experience that it had to do with addiction. But do you think that's an automatic feeling? Everyone thinks they had some control over it, maybe?
Well, what I found a lot of regrets to the hospice system was we wish we had gone to the doctor earlier, or we wished we'd push for more tests. That's what they regret. If they can go back, they would try harder earlier on to try to prevent what's happening in front of them. And so, I think we do replay a lot of that stuff in the past. We can't touch what's back here in the past.
No.
The only thing we do is bring it forward and let it bother us today, but we can't change it. I know what forgiveness is on the spiritual end of life, and I depend on that every heartbeat. But in grief work, forgiveness has a different definition for me. Forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different yesterday. Because what took place 24 hours ago or 24 years ago will never be any different. So I have to give up the hope of it ever being any different and find where I am and begin to build my life now. Because if we don't, we keep thinking it's going to change somehow. We may not verbalize it, but we're trying to take actions to make it change. But it's giving up the hope of a different yesterday. It'll never be different.
No, that's very good. And just that crushing of your plans. We set all these plans up. And, our children are going to get married. They're going to have kids.
Yes.
They're going to do this and that. And they're going to be this type of person. And we're setting ourselves up for some failure there sometimes.
Yeah, but you're right on target, Rhonda, because it's another loss, the loss of dreams. From the time we find out you're pregnant, you start dreaming of that child. Well, if something happens to that child, you lose your dreams. Well, we actually grieve what could have been, should have been, and might have been. All those are gone now. And so we lose the dreams that we have for that child. And we can't re-dream for them because they're no longer with us. I just wrote a little article on what hurts is the presence of their absence. Presence of their absence. They should be here. We should be going through the same thing that other kids their age are doing.
Right.
So we feel like we've been cheated. It's normal to feel like you've been cheated and robbed. Because, and there again, it's a good feeling, but we need to find a way to put words to it. and go in and admit it. That's what we feel is being robbed and cheated. We're not going to surprise God with anything we say. So why not say it? You
know, and
know, so,
anger towards him is no severe either.
when I lead groups and I always encourage people to write letters.
Yeah.
And I've even asked people to write a letter to God. I remember one young lady in a group whose baby had died, and she was angry at God. And so I asked her to write a letter to God. She came back to the next group, and she wanted to be the first one to speak. And she said, I wrote a letter to God, and I went outside and I read it to him. And so then she read the letter to the group, but and she unloaded on God. I mean, just a little anger. But you know what it did? It gave words to her grief. It finally came out. So that's when the grief became mourning. And that's when you find comfort, according to Jesus. That's when you find comfort.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I think it's in James, it says something about he's close to the brokenhearted. Is that, you know, I really felt God's presence so in a different way. The day I lost him, see, I was standing in the front yard of her apartment and couldn't go in. It was being treated as a crime scene, and I just didn't go in. And God said, be in agreement with me. So, so plainly. And I had been praying that he would heal her from the addiction. And he said, I have. So it's just powerful when the God of the universe just spends a moment talking to you like that.
Right. Because there's a helplessness for us at that time. Anytime we're in grief, we're helpless. We can't fix it. One of my favorite scriptures, Psalm 147:3, it says, He heals the brokenhearted. He binds up their wounds. He does that. And I can't heal any broken hearts. I wish I could, but I can't. The whole we can do is provide some things that will guide someone. Just like your podcast, someone will grab some little something that will help them heal for that moment, for that time. That I know that's the reason you do this. You must provide tools for people. You know, my dad was a mechanic. He worked on airplanes. He always used tools. He was very good with tools and cars. Now I understand why he got upset when his boys left his tools out in the yard. Because tools were important to him. Well, now that I do grief work, tools are important to me. I teach tools, I share tools. They're important, and they're worthless until they're applied. That they have value.
And another one for me is gratitude. I really felt the change in my journey of grief when I started being grateful for what I had in her. The whole process of having a child that you get to have 30 years with, you know, I didn't really think of that until it was somehow at a retreat. It just hit me that I just feel very grateful. And that's kind of a turn in the road when you can think on that aspect of it, that you have had a relationship that maybe you wouldn't have had, you know, in a different life or.
Right. And plus you're looking back at the memories and cherishing those memories a little bit more instead of being overwhelmed by them. It may be more of a comforting memory at that time too, because it was a blessing to have that memory, the ability to remember someone that close.
Yeah. So when you get together, is it always in person, your groups?
Yes. Any of the groups I've done have always been in person. Usually they're based in a hospital or some churches. I meet once a week for 6 weeks. I'm usually through the fall of the year, I'm traveling a little bit more, so I'm not really doing groups on a regular basis. So.
Do you have any aspect of, you said you're a sculptor. Do you try to give the people something to do with their hands? Or, I mean, is that any part of it? For me, I started painting. I'm not even good at it, but I paint statues and I paint rocks, and that's what would help out because I need to do something to get out of my head a little bit.
That's exactly the reason I started grief work and sculpting within a week of each other, back in 95.
Wow,
I can't fix a griever, but I can fix something in clay. because it gave me my balance I needed to be able to fix something. So one of the workshops that I've done several times actually is I'll get a group of people together and I give them all some clay, and I lead them, or we sculpt a little heart in clay. We'll break that heart, and we put a bandage across the front of it, across that break. We'll put scars on it. And then when we finish, because as we're working on that, usually a 2-hour time frame, as we're working on that, I'm talking about grief and loss and allow them to talk about their losses. And then when they finish that little heart that they've done, I say, tell me about that. Why did you make that heart the way you did? Because they make their heart when they're thinking about their loved one, but it gives them something to do with their hands and their feelings and molded in clay. It's called a healing heart workshop. That's it's a valuable time, because out of that, of course, they get a fired piece of clay that reminds them of that workshop and the things they put into it. But at the same time, we cover leaf tools, wisdom has to talk. Basically, it's a morning session. They get to mourn.
That's wonderful. Such important work you're doing.
I am so blessed to be able to do what I do. Absolutely. I'm blessed.
You did write a book called, is this the only book you've written? What Now?
That's my latest book. I've written probably 4 books. That's the latest one. What Now? Because I hear so many people struggling with grief. What do I need? What do I do now? What now? So that book, that What Now, is the grief tools I cover in a group session. And the last part of that book is a journal that have some leading questions, like, if you could talk to your loved one again, what would you thank them for? And it gives about 5 pages. You could write thank yous. What would you forgive them for? It gives 5 pages to write forgiveness. What would you like to say to them? What would you like to hear from them? Those type of things. What Now came out about a year ago, and it's available on Amazon. That it's something that guides people to put words to their grief. I hope to write a book for children in grief, but it will involve having an adult working with that child to guide them through the same process of putting words to it in a child's language. So that's my next little project.
That's going to be good. That's going to be good. That's
What
hard
happened?
for a child to express those words, I know.
Oh, it is, right, because too many times they're left out. It's almost like they're invisible grievers. Like they're invisible.
It's funny you say that. That leads into how siblings sometimes can get, even adult siblings can get kind of forgotten about because the parents have lost a child. And in my case, how do different people grieve in that role of a sibling versus a parent, male and female? Do you see a lot of differences in how people grieve?
Losing a sibling is you expect to have that relationship longer than any other relationship in your life. You think about it, that's a brother or sister who grows up all their life together. That's a special grief, because you lose again the dreams that we had. We have memories of the past, but we still have dreams to deal with that. Whereas the parents, it's almost like an expected loss. And with a child, of course, it's not expected. So that's difficult. And so there again, every person is going to grieve differently. We grieve according to our personality. Some people are more open personalities, and some people are shut down. We grieve according to other losses we've had in our life, because that dictates whether we verbalize it or whether we shut down. And we also grieve the relationship that we had with the person who died, because everyone has a different relationship as far as closeness and communication. And so everyone's going to grieve differently. It's as unique as our fingerprint. Everyone's a little bit different with it. So, but one of the basic needs I find, Rhonda, is everyone needs to put words to it. There could be different words, but everyone needs to put their words to it.
And do you think counseling is a big part of that? If you don't have a group or a family member or a friend, do you suggest how to find a counselor maybe to something?
Right. And it's one of the things that we find when we referred people like another series, we find a counselor. It's called hospice or a funeral home, and see who they would recommend, because they're dealing with death and dying every day. And so they will have some list of counselors. And the counselors may be affiliated with the church and they may not, and that's okay. I could tell you, I have a theology degree. I have 0 classes in grief. So they don't necessarily train pastors to deal with grief.
Right.
So don't be surprised if our pastors are not willing to listen to it. Maybe they can't hear it. That may not be their gift. And so it's okay. I'm not expect a pastor to deal with grief because I'm the pastor of the church. Not necessarily true. Sometimes a counselor is trained and better. And, let's share, Rhonda, I moderate a grief site. But you know what? I've had 2 heart attacks. When I had a heart attack, I didn't say I want a doctor who's had a heart attack to treat me because they can't know what it feels like unless they've had a heart attack. No, that'd been foolish. What I wanted was the best trained doctor, one that had most compassion, and one that could take care of my needs. That's who I wanted. So it really isn't necessary that somebody goes through the exact same thing, but someone can have compassion for you more than someone who's gone through the same thing.
That's such a good point. We always think in our group, we're all usually parents, siblings, friends of someone that lost someone to addiction. That's our little group. We deal with the loss after addiction. But I love that you're saying it takes compassion. Doesn't always have to be you've walked in those shoes. It's just you understand the heart, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone that is dealing with someone in addiction now, or is that something out of your
I'm familiar with it. Through being a pastor, I've through that many times. It takes a lot of patience for the entire family, every person, because not only is that person in addiction, the whole family's in addiction. Because it's almost like we're going through it with them, in a sense of there's a helplessness to fix it. We can't fix it. All of us are fixers. We like to fix things, especially the guys. We like to fix things and realize we're helpless in doing that. So it comes about, even while the person's in addiction, it's okay to get some help during that time to help you deal with what's going on. The coping mechanism, learn some tools to when to walk away and when to stay. Be able to learn that, and when to confront and when to change the subject and walk away. So those are things that it helps to have a counselor, someone who will guide us in that area, because the entire family's in addiction.
Yeah, that's good advice. I know Finding Hope is another group that's kind of like a faith-based Al-Anon that I help lead groups of that are still dealing with that active and constant chaos that comes with the substance use disorder. So
Yes.
they're always wondering when enabling is enabling and when it's just being a loving family member.
That's
Tricky road.
it is. It's hard to balance that and still take care of ourselves every day too. We still have to live life, and so we have to balance that. That's a heavy load. Yeah.
I know in our retreat that we just got back from, self-care comes up, that you have dealt with this addiction maybe for 5 years, 10 years, whatever your journey was with your loved one. And now you are dealing with the loss of that person. And we can only imagine how to get back to just caring for ourselves, because you've been caring for everyone else except you. And so we always try to get into nature and take walks and learn some breathing techniques, spend time with God, be alone with God, and prayer and meditation, because He will meet you there if you spend intimate. And
Right. Right. And I encourage people to maybe look back at something you've done before and you enjoyed, but you put on a shelf. Maybe it's time to take it off the shelf. It may be the painting. It might be the sculpture at work. It may be sketching. It may be music, but some type of expression outside of us. And maybe because life got so busy that we had to push it aside, to go back, pull it back out and see if maybe there may be something you can invest some time in it. And it's okay to take some classes. I mean, maybe a group of you goes together and takes some classes and see if there's an interest. Try something completely different. Glass blowing. I thought that would be interesting. You can't inhale. That'd be interesting to do that.
or axe throwing.
Right. Yeah.
Doing
Yeah.
a friend of
Exactly.
mine was telling me about that, or breaking. They have these rooms you go to and just break dishes.
They do. They have one probably 5 miles from me, and I thought about going and just experience that. And we have a daughter who's having breast cancer, no mastectomy, and then she was declared cancer free, and then a month later she had a stroke, and so
Oh,
she's learned to walk without a cane now, and her speech is good. She goes fishing more than I do now. So, but I thought maybe I should take her and just let her get into a room and just break things.
sort of kids.
Yeah, they
Be proud.
crash room, maybe that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Might be good therapy.
might be a good thing. I have a friend that is in our group that she just would go outside and scream.
Yeah.
Loud as she could,
Yeah.
scream to the top of her lungs, and I look at her and I can't imagine her even screaming. She's
Oh.
so timid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
she
heard,
just scream.
I've heard people screaming into their pillows, because it muffles it really well. But yeah, what it amounts to is getting it out. And that's what grief is. The mourning, putting words to grief and letting it come out. Sometimes the screaming, because we can't find the words. We can't think of words, but there's something needs to come out. And it might be that scream.
That's amazing.
God can
Yeah.
tell what it says.
Right. He knows our hearts so
He
well.
does. Loves us
And
anyway.
yeah, he does. He has a big job, doesn't he?
I keep him up 24/7.
Well, I know one thing that's helped me is just pouring into other people. That became my healing, just healing, dealing with people that I know are in the same place, and like you're doing. I mean, just coming along beside, and it can be the simplest thing. It can be sending them a song on a text from YouTube, or just saying, I know you're going through this, and that just helps your own healing. And there's the different ways to do that.
Right. One of the approaches I took in a group and on individual work too, I will tell people, I'm not responsible for you, but I am responsible to you. If I was responsible for someone else, I couldn't sleep at night. I'd be worried about them all the time. I can't do that with grievers, but what I can do is be responsible to them. And their responsibility is to give them the very best tools I know about and give them my presence, and let's just go from there. I can do that. I can take that responsibility. But I can't be responsible for them. It's like if I receive tools from someone, it's up to me what I do with them. I can work on them, I can put words to it, or I can put them in the trash. It's up to me.
Yeah. Might be a little bit of work to it too.
Right. You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah. It's a little bit of work that we do, and it'll turn out to work on us for a while for sure. We can question some things.
Huh. And what church are you affiliated with, if any, now, or?
Yeah, the Southern Baptist is my background. When I was with Freddie, went to a Southern Baptist Bible College in Southeast Kentucky in Appalachia. They always said if you could pastor in Appalachia, you could pastor anywhere. And I believe that. And I received some training there that really helped me because I had a pastor mentor who'd been there for about 30 years. And I was a student pastor. And so I worked with him, and he called me and said, I want you to go with me. We're going to the head of the holler. That's basically the house at the top of the holler between the mountains. He said, there's been a death. So I went with him. We walked in this house. The house was just barely standing. And across the room, there was one woman, and she was seated at a table, and her husband had died. The pastor pulled a chair up across from her. He reached over and took her hand, and he said, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. What do you need for me to do? And I read that touched me so much, Ron, because I realized this guy had been a pastor 30 years, and he said, I don't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. Well, now I know what he was saying. Because we don't know what to say when there's been a death. We don't know what to do. But then he said, what do you need? And I know you do the same thing when you walk alongside people and you meet people, you should find out what do you need? What can I do for you? Because it's their journey. If we can make their journey a little bit softer, that's our purpose.
Yeah.
Soften it a little bit. I can't take grief away, but I know the tools that I teach can soften it a little. It'll take away the sharp edges.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's better than someone just saying, well, you'll heal in time. And time is a huge part of it. Yeah. I mean, you do heal with time, but in those desperate spiraling downward dark places, that's just not enough,
That's right.
You got to keep breathing until the next day and the next day.
Yeah.
So that's I know what you mean though when people say I have no words. In all of the places I remember after Lacey died, the funeral was the first place, and then there was another honoring her life with her friends was the second place I went. And of all the people that came up to me, there was one friend that said, I have no words for you. And she was pretty much a Bible scholar, a professor at Bible school, kind of like your pastor friend that she just stood there and said, I wish there were some words. And I think that's the best thing to say.
Yeah.
And Lee, tell me about your daughter. Those are the two most beautiful statements for me.
Because Lacey's still part of you, and the privilege is to be able to talk about her is letting people know that she's still here. Okay, she's still here. That's the beauty of it. Continue to do that, and that's what we learned is we want people to tell me about the one who died, especially if I never met them. Tell me about how would you describe them. I conduct a lot of funeral services, and that's one of the things I try to get people to do is tell me about the person who died. What was their personality? What was they like? What did they enjoy? And then when you hear that, then you incorporate that into honoring them at a funeral service. That's important for the person to say, this is what I remember about that. Well, one of the ways that we can continue with grief is take one of those elements that was part of them and let it become part of us. Let that element become part of us because they enjoyed it. I want it to be part of my life too, and that honors them because we continue to carry their memory with us.
Yeah, and some are always trying to find a way to memorialize them. First anniversary of their death, the first birthday that they have to go through without their child. So we try to come up with things. I had Lacey's first Christmas. She died in August, so it was just a few months that, I dealt with Christmas. Hard Christmas to have and be joyful, of course. But I set up a tree just for her and her own favorite things and ornaments. And I kept buying ornaments that reminded me of things she liked. And then all of her friends started sending me ornaments. So there's different ways to just memorialize them.
Yes. And the positive things I hear you say right there is having friend input too. They gave ornaments. Let them have some input on that. That was good for them too. They'll be able to remember her that way. Special.
Well, you've just had so many good things, tools. I'm sure there's more, but I want everyone to buy your book and read more about that too.
Yeah.
We'll put a link in there that in the comments of how to get your book. I'm sure it's on Amazon.
It is on Amazon. I have one called A Guide for Grievers that I wrote probably 7 years ago. That basically has the same tools because I found that grievers we need a roadmap in some way because Nobody teaches us how to grieve. Nobody teaches us how to deal with loss. We're taught to get things in life. Get a good education, get a good job, get a house, get a car, get. Nobody taught us how to lose. We don't have the tools. So I thought, well, we need a guide. So basically, What Now is a guidebook with a journal in it also.
Right. That's so good. Yeah, we just learn how to do all the things that people are comfortable with too. You know, we stay out of those ucky, uncomfortable places. And
Yes, yes. I always encourage people, if you feel that you need to go someplace that you may be uncomfortable, always have an exit plan. Always have an exit plan. Don't ride with anyone else. Take your own car so you can leave when you want to, and have an exit plan. Maybe even have a friend who's going to protect you a little bit. That you get uncomfortable, you can just touch it here, and they know, okay, we need to kind of step away from this conversation. And
that's, yeah.
that helps us have an exit plan so we don't feel overwhelmed with it.
And just getting back into the groove of going places and being at a party or with a group of people that seem so happy. I know people that in grief will say, well, I just can't be around the normal, at the happy pill. Even people at church that are just, you know, with their game and everything's one, you just don't feel like you belong in that sense. But like you said, just plan ahead, you know, you don't have to say yes to everything, but sometimes you might want to say yes so they keep inviting you too, you know, or say, don't, I won't come now, but keep asking me, you know.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Try not now, but keep asking. Yeah, that's a good approach. Yeah, and in some cases you may say, "What part of no do you not understand?" No, I'm not gonna. So we have to take ownership of some of that and extend ourselves out a little bit, and then come back to home base. So it's a process, a hard process. But you know what? Once we make some progress in that, we need to look around and see someone else who's struggling with grief and understand they're going through the same process. Maybe we can do some things to help them.
Right. It's not just always us, you know, that when you say, how could God allow me to have this pain of losing a child? And then you realize he gave up his child on a cross.
Yeah.
Perfect child. You know, mine was not perfect.
Well, yeah. That's the beauty, because that's what you're doing too in your life, Rhonda. You're guiding people who are hurting because of your pain too.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to honor her because she wanted to help people in addiction. And I was planned on going back and being that one that says, I'm sober now, so this is what I went through. So like that's part of what like you said, adopt what she would be doing because she's not. So that's what God said to me too. So it's all him though, it's not me.
I understand that perfectly. I one last thing I'll share with you. In fact, I just shared it with a friend last night. Was about the work that I do in grief. I've written once, if you're using the gift that God has given to you, you have maximum effectiveness with minimum weariness.
Wow.
We've both met people who have maximum weariness with minimum effectiveness because they're trying to do something not gifted to do. But when you find your sweet spot and you're doing something you feel like God's put on your heart, there is that maximum effectiveness with minimum weariness. We may get tired in it, but we won't get tired of it.
That's good. So, and that's so true.
Oh, when I read that, it was at a time when I was getting ready to make the decision to leave the pastorate to do grief work. When I read that, and I struggled with that because I've been trained as a pastor and experienced as a pastor, and I was going to a whole different new area. And when I read that statement, I realized what he had given me, and made it easier to change.
Yeah, I'm sure you were a fantastic pastor too.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. But I went back and see it as a training ground because I was dealing with grievers.
Yeah,
and fell in love with grievers.
That's great. Wow, you're just a blessing to have here. And when people hear this, I hope they get those moments of clarity because sometimes it can really change your path. And we're hoping for just to give them some relief and comfort and a direction.
Send me just one little piece that they grab, but that's what they need to hear.
True.
We do it. Yep.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bob. And I've written down unexpected blessings in grief. That's one last thing I'll ask you. Can you think of people that have had unexpected great things happen because of their grief? Or to me, it's a different depth of joy that I get now. I don't waste my time on stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just
That's what I was thinking. Priorities can change. Which what comes to my mind, they will change their priorities because what was very important in life goes to the bottom of the list, and what's never important goes to the top. I've had people say that it turned their world upside down. I actually think a loss can turn our world right side up. Because the important things are the important things now.
that's good.
This is the way we look at people and relationships.
Yeah, it does. You get your priorities completely shifted.
Yeah, that's what I would say, that when I was with hospice, that's what I saw with families, that it would change relationships.
And good. Well, thank you for being here. That's just it's just incredible that you're taking the time out to share all this wisdom, and we hope that it will bring some healing and comfort.
Yeah. And they joined in that hope. That's what I'd like to happen too. Somebody just grab a little part that can use them for a while, kind of put a bandage over that break. Bandages don't heal. They just hold you together while God does the healing.
Right.
So if we can give out a bandage, that's great. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Good. I know God is in that healing business, so we're both in that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
both have seen that.
We get to see it.
Okay, Bob, thanks again, and I hope to read your book myself. I'm going to order it.
Won't take long.
Okay.
It's a short book.
Okay.
Somebody people told me it's really simple. I said, that's good. That's me.
That's my favorite kind.
Well, yeah.
And those ones don't always get read all the way through. So, yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, well, you take care, and
All right.
I thank you again for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, Rhonda. Thank you. Wish you the best, girl.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for being a part of the Grief, Grace, and Gratitude community. Remember, God has not forgotten you, your dreams, or your broken heart. Join us for our next episode, available wherever you listen to podcasts. To help us reach more people, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media. Those links are in the show notes. What will you trust God with today?